Live from M&T Bank Stadium, I'm Spencer German Anthoyn Moeglin from the comfort of his own home. Also joining me here for this post-game conversation, Browns fall to the Ravens tonight by a final score of 35-10. It looked like the Browns are going to cover that 20-point spread, and it didn't happen at the end. The Ravens were able to pull it out with a couple late touchdown drives and a couple different things that, in terms of consequences here, Ravens end up as the AFC North Champs from a win. Browns guaranteed at least the number 3 overall pick, which we'll talk about here a little bit later in the conversation. But a disappointing way for a disappointing season to come to an end. 3-14, the final record for the Browns in 2024 after a season that had Super Bowl aspirations at the start of it. And here to break it all down with Spencer German Anthoyn Moeglin from Cleveland Browns on SI. Megs, just I guess a quick second here, just initial reaction to this game going final, and we kind of take a look back on everything that transpired this year, the 4 different quarterbacks, the Deshaun Watson disaster, so many injuries for the second straight season as well, and everything in between. Just, what is going to stand out the most about what went wrong this year?
Yeah, I got two thoughts that are kind of overarching right now. The first is that we made it. We made it through it. It's finally done, dude.
It sounds like we're like getting a pain relief or something. Dude, we all survived.
It feels like the handcuffs are off. Finally,
I'm already making plans for wild card weekend and have some friends over and eat some pizza and drink some beer.
You're gonna drink. You need it, dude. You need it. You're in Baltimore right now. You're about to get on the road. After getting on the road, the best text I ever got. This is for everyone back home. I was in Pasadena a couple days ago, covering the Buckeyes for our sister site, Ohio State Buckeyes on SI. Spencer texts me and goes, "Yes, you're going to Pasadena to cover a team that's going to score 90 points over 2 games. I'm going to Baltimore to cover Bailey Zappi and the Cleveland Browns." So,
but hey, I'll give them some credit today because they at least scored more than they've scored the last 2 weeks. It was 9 points over the last 2 games. They scored 10 today.
We got 10.
So we got a little bit more excitement from Bailey Zappi.
We got 10. No, all jokes aside, we made it through. Like honestly, like this was a brutal season. You think back to some of the bad ones. 2016, they go 0-16, or then 2017 they go 0-16. 2016 1-15. There's been some bad football around this city, around this franchise for a number of years, and this one feels like it's much worse than all the others, because I think back, the other point I had was we sat on this podcast and we talked about it in August or whatever it was, and you were like, I remember it vividly, you said, what's a disappointing season? And I said anything less than an AFC Championship game, and we are 3-13.
We are way past that.
We're way further than that, and it's just everywhere that this season could have gone wrong, it has gone wrong, and it's just as it comes to a final close, man, this is as bad as it gets, and it was tonight was hardly a consolation prize.
Well, and I think the reason this is worse than like 1-31 in 2 seasons is because, like, back then, you knew there was a path forward. You knew there was a reason for it. Like, you knew there was a reason for being as bad as they were. What's the reason for being 3-13 this year? There isn't one. Like, this was supposed to be the culmination of all the players you drafted during that era, all the players you drafted after the trades you made for Deshaun Watson. It was all supposed to come together this year, and you fell flat on your face, and everything just kind of blew up in your face. So, I think that's well said by you, though. Like, it's so disappointing that this team ended up where they are, and we're sitting here and talking about 3-14 team rather than one that's going to the playoffs and competing for things. And, it's funny, like, opposite sideline today, the Ravens are on the sideline celebrating and whooping it up and having a good time at, like, that last interception at the end of the game by one of their defensive linemen, and they're, like, having a good time with it because they know they just won the AFC North. And on the other side, it's like there's so much uncertainty with this roster and where they kind of go from here. We'll have a lot more time to reflect on all those things, so I don't want to like dive too much into that point of this specifically. But in terms of how this game played out, we know Bailey Zappi was going to start coming in. He did. They did pivot to Dorian Thompson-Robinson for one series, and Kevin Stefanski kind of said after the game like he just wanted to kind of make a final decision after that series, and he decided to go back to Bailey Zappi just based on how the game was going. It produced you 10 points, which I guess is better than the last 2 games with DTR, but still more of the same. An offense that looked stuck in the mud. Took them to the fourth quarter to finally score that touchdown. They had 3 points at the half. That was all they scored until the fourth quarter. And I don't know. I walk away from this feeling like we have yet another quarterback that we can cross off the list of guys that the Browns should sort of focus on bringing back next year. I mean, maybe you bring Bailey Zappi back as like your fourth quarterback for, the offseason and camp and all those things, but I don't know that Bailey showed us anything that we haven't seen from this team or this offense already in terms of providing some sort of spark. And I just kind of go into the offseason feeling like, aside from Deshaun Watson, who you're kind of stuck with, I think you just rethink this quarterback room entirely.
Yeah, you certainly could. That certainly could be the case. And Bailey even talked about it too. Like I was a little confused when they went Bailey first drive, and they went to Dorian in the second drive or whatever it was.
Well, it was so Bailey had the first three drives. He had the first drive, second drive, he threw the pick six. It was like 2 plays. He came back out for a third drive, and then on the fourth drive they went to DTR. And I actually thought it was 2 series of DTR because it spanned 2 quarters. It was like the break between the first and the second quarter, and I thought he was out there for 2. Then I realized it was only 1. And then they stuck with Bailey Zappi the rest of the way. So that's kind of how it played out. But yeah.
And Bailey even said it. You weren't in the press conference room when he was in there, but
no, I missed it.
He even said it. He was like, that was part of the plan. He goes, that wasn't a shock to him. That was a part of the game plan of giving Bailey the start and then getting DTR some reps in there too, which whatever. Fine. The big one that stands out, DTR missed Elijah Moore coming across the middle. That would have been a massive play.
Yeah, he was
not that it would have changed much, but that's one where if it is legitimately like, hey, and he said it 4 weeks ago, he's like, hey, this is going to be an audition for me. Yeah, sometimes auditions don't go the right way. And that's another one, another I guess, feather in the cap of like, hey, he doesn't have what it takes. And it's unfortunate. I think we've banged the drum and we've said we've said our piece about Dorian and how we're both pretty big fans of his and wanted it to go well. It just unfortunately didn't go well at all for him. And Bailey, much the same, and not that we were expecting, I was hoping, I guess, for a big game. Wasn't going to happen. Hard to imagine that guy beat us a couple years ago because it didn't look all that smooth tonight. But like, it is time for drop a little grenade in the in what's going on in Cleveland Browns world, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that gets shooken up really quickly, in my opinion.
I think the one positive we could take away from an offensive season that was, I mean, this like set offenses back to the Stone Age this year, the way the Browns offense was. I saw a stat earlier about like DVOA with the Browns was like the worst ever in games not since like 1978 in games not started or in games started by any quarterback that wasn't Jameis Winston. And when you threw Jameis Winston's numbers into the mix, they were still like 13th worst all time since 1978 in DVOA. So it's even with him, it wasn't great, but it was, I guess, slightly better. But in a year where everything just was awful on offense, and they have a lot of sort of figuring out to do, whether it's changing coaches, a lot of overhaul with the roster, all these different things. Maybe the one positive is that, and something that Andrew Berry can put a feather in his cap on, is he nailed this Jerry Jeudy thing. Like the trade for Jerry worked out beautifully. He set the record tonight for receptions in a season, got his 90th late in the game there. And so that was a pretty big deal because you traded for this guy, peanuts. And when you really think about it, a 4th and a 5th round pick. And you got a guy who obviously exceeded expectations, played at such a high level, and then I think can be your number 1 wide receiver moving forward. And that's maybe the one saving grace is, okay, the Browns have at least identified that they have something in Jerry Jeudy that they can build around, and then what the offense looks like around that, I guess, is TBD.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the fact that you didn't have to give up a lot for him, and the fact that he proved tonight wasn't his best night. He had a couple of drops in there, but like,
yeah, I think it was 6 for 64 or something like that.
Yeah, it's still solid. Yeah, that's exactly it. And
over 1,200 yards receiving, which again is he hadn't done that in his career.
That's what I more lean towards.
Also, by the way, he also got his first Pro Bowl nomination this week. Yeah. So yeah, like I mean, he put it together in a big way. And again, if you're looking for something positive on the offensive side of the ball, because there wasn't a lot, he was it for me. Like this year,
I more lean towards the guy who had 90 catches and 1,200 yards, right? Not the guy tonight who had a handful of drops, right? Probably bags are packed for a sweet vacation starting tomorrow, And it like that is part of the joke, but honestly, like at 3-13, that's a tough game to come into, facing one of the best teams in all of the NFL, and they proved it tonight. But Jerry is a piece that you're certainly going to build around, and there's a couple pieces that are in there as well. Like I think up front, you look at a guy like Wyatt Teller, you look at a guy like DeJuan Jones, assuming he comes back from
He can
injury
stay
well.
healthy. Yeah.
He's got to stay healthy, but you got a couple pieces up front. Joel Bitonio is going to be a question mark only because if he wants to hang it up and doesn't want to go through this again, who can blame him, right? But if he does want to give it a go, you at least have two guards and a tackle that you for sure know. So you're going to have to fill.
As you talk about the offensive line, I think Jack Conklin played really well this year.
Jack Conklin's great.
The big question with Jack Conklin is, can he stay healthy similar to DeJuan Jones? Now, I think he's I think given the nature of his contract, I have to look this up. I think it's kind of tough to move on from Jack Conklin because the dead cap's a little bit more than maybe what you want. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think he at least played well enough to warrant, we try to bring this guy back and get another year out of him at least before we start talking about that, especially as you're sort of trying to stay competitive on the fly here. So, but yeah, there's other things that you can point at and say there's some promise there, there's some promise there. I just think Jerry stands out as the best thing from this offense. And he even talked after the game about how I asked him what do you think you proved this year? And he said, I think I proved to people that I am one of the best receivers in this league. And, I hope I can keep building on that and compete for Super Bowls. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. And he's talked about the team aspect of things a lot, especially late in the season, how he would trade all the individual stats for wins. But definitely a saving grace, I guess, in that way is, there was a lot of ugliness to this offense at times, but the one bell of the ball that would kind of come out of these games every week was Jerry Jeudy had another good game for the most part.
Yeah, and I would say too, one of my favorite parts about him is learning the team first thought process behind what he does, right? That's a guy who we don't know. This is his first year with him, and the fact that he seems very genuine in the fact that he would trade it all for wins on the field, and that's not always the case with wideouts. It's not always the case with players just in general. Some guys are motivated by what they can do, and it seems like he can put up some numbers, but he also is about winning. So that's a corner piece. That's somebody you're going to look to build around as you try to figure this whole thing out.
We don't have to dwell on the defense too much in this one. I think the big story is that Miles didn't come away with a sack tonight, which means he will not be the sack champion. And there was a chance he could have been tied for it if Trey Hendrickson did nothing. But I think in the Steelers-Bengals game that's going on actually on the video boards behind me, he already had at least one sack tonight. So I think Trey Hendrickson now in sole possession of being having the sack title for, I think, a second consecutive season. Because I think he actually got, maybe he didn't get it last year. Maybe he got it 2 years ago. But either way, so that's out of the question for Miles, unfortunately. Just a tough matchup late in the season. You got Lamar Jackson, who's tough to bring down. But as you look at the defense as a whole, Megs, I'm just going to say this, and I said this in my takeaways piece over at Cleveland Browns on si.com/NFL/Browns. I just think there was unrealistic expectations put on this defense because of how well they played last year. In some aspects, they had historic numbers last year. I understand the road stuff was one thing, and that was tough, but they were a historic defense last year, and I think everybody just expected that to be the case again this year. They were not as dominant as they were last year. I'm willing to concede that. But, Megs, how many games did we watch where they kept the team within a possession or two for as long as they possibly could, even though the offense was going 3 and out, 5 and out, throwing interceptions and giving an offense a short field. I think they did everything they could to try to keep these games competitive and close. And when you have an offense that was just as inefficient and ineffective as the Browns offense was, they did the defense a disservice. So I don't, yes, it's a 3-14 season and it was miserable and there was a lot that went wrong. I'm not going to sit there and say the defense needs overhaul and all these players suck and we should fire Jim Schwartz. I just don't think that's where anybody's head should be at.
No, not at all. You look back on the schedule right now, you talk about just to that point, games you lost to a 21-point Giants team, right, who scored 21 points. You should never lose that football game. You lost to a Raiders team who scored 20 points right there. So bang, there's 2 wins right there. You lost to an Eagles team who's one of the best in the NFL. You only give up 20 points to the Eagles, all right? You lost to the Bengals in 2 different occasions, 21 the first time and 24 the second time. So both of those are good enough to win. You only give up 27 to the Chargers. That one's a little on the higher side. Fine, whatever. And then you lose to the Steelers. They you only give up 21 to the Chiefs, dude.
The Broncos game, 2 of the touchdowns were pick sixes.
Yes, it's 41 points, and 2 of the touchdowns were pick sixes there. So you should
maybe the defense didn't play their best game in Denver because they gave up a lot more points in that one. But still, the offense did enough in that game to win, but they also shot themselves in the foot. The defense was still I don't know. We could go game by game and project all these things and talk about that game they had an interception, that game was short. We could pinpoint all these different things. my overarching point on it is mostly makes just like
Good enough.
Some people are like Jim Schwartz has got to go. Like the defense regressed this year. I just kind of expected that it was going to take some steps, but I didn't expect it to be so dominant like last year. But it's just crazy to me that that people aren't seeing the forest of the trees on this. Like I think the defense largely kept them in games. They're finishing, by the way, top 3 in third down defense this year in the NFL. Like they were pretty good at getting off the field. It's just the offense gave you nothing.
And even tonight they competed, right? Outside of the Derrick Henry touchdown, you give up 35 points, right? One was a pick six, so you give up 28 points.
Halftime it was what, 14-3? Yeah, 14-3 at the half. Like you're right in the game, but the offense couldn't do anything.
Against the best quarterback and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. The last thing I'll say on it is you go back to 2023 and those numbers were certainly inflated, right? And part of that was because they faced that schedule where they got so lucky. You got to think back far, but they faced like 5 or 6 backup quarterbacks, and that includes Clayton Tune, that includes Joe Burrow that's hurt, that was really hurt in 2023. That includes Jake Browning and a lot of those guys. So you got to factor that in. Like that was certainly
they played Kenny Pickett against the Steelers,
like a couple times, and like like that off the numbers were off the charts, but the reason was, and then it gets kind of swept under the rug. And certainly when you look back as time goes on, you're not going to remember that. But they played a not a murderer's row of quarterbacks, and that certainly helped things.
Well, and that's the other thing is like even when they played the murderer's row of quarterbacks this year, which was a talking point at the start of the season, I don't really recall many games where like the quarterback just absolutely torched this defense. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has been kind of pedestrian all year. He didn't put up like massive numbers against them. I think the only game I could think about where a quarterback like really ripped them apart was probably, I don't remember a stat specifically, but like the Denver game, I think Bo Nix had a pretty good game in that one. Mm-hmm. And even though I know he also threw a pick in that game, but then also you had, I think the Jaden Daniels performance in Washington was another one because that game became a blowout. Those are the two that come to mind off the top of my head.
And the only other guy is Taysom Hill. Like that's literally the only other guy that
that's right. And he's like kind of a fluky, gadgety player. So it wasn't really like he was like some star quarterback either. So, but yeah, I don't know. I just think the defense is not the problem when I look at why the season went the way that it did. So there's some issues, and I think some of those players, which we'll talk about, that were maybe problems, are probably going to get cut, and we're going to be talking about a different look in some areas. But we don't have to do that right now. But yeah, I think the defense was generally a solid unit this year, and they just didn't get the benefit of the doubt because the offense was so bad. The other thing I'll say on the defense side of the ball, obviously Rodney McLeod made it known before the season this was going to be his last season, his last game today. He talked about getting a little bit emotional out there. He's from this area, so he had some family in town for the game, and just like what he experienced and kind of the emotions of it all. He talked about like his 2 years in Cleveland and just the relationships that he built and what they'll mean to him. And so, listen, I think the impact Rodney had even in 2 seasons is pretty obvious from the outside looking in. Even he's been a great leader for this team, and I think everyone's going to miss him. The last thing I really want to hit on, Megs, is obviously what this loss means for the Browns. And I said at the top of the show, they are now guaranteed to have at least the 3rd overall pick in the draft. They can't drop any. I guess it's technically higher. They can't move any higher in the order. They can. I don't know. It's always weird. I always have a weird time talking about this because I don't know if higher means like you're going lower in the numbers, but whatever. You guys get the idea. They cannot go lower, I guess, than number 3, and they can potentially get to the number 1 overall pick. I actually don't think it's all that far fetched for them to get there. By the way, Megs, they got 2 results tomorrow that play into this. But I think it's actually a realistic possibility that they could end the weekend with the number 1 overall pick.
Which is crazy. And what is it? Do you need the Patriots to beat the Bills?
Yeah, I probably should lay out the scenario. You need the Patriots to win, and you need the Titans to win. Mm-hmm. Both, and I understand like those are 2 bad teams, so it seems far-fetched. But remember, the Bills can't move anywhere they can't move higher than the 2 seed. They can't move lower than the 2 seed. They're locked in as the 2 seed in the AFC, so they're not really playing for anything. I think the Bills are starting. They're starting Josh Allen tomorrow only because he has this consecutive streak of starts. And so they're probably going to play him like a series and then take him out of the game. So they're resting a lot of their starters. They're not going to risk injury. And so because of that, like the Patriots are going to have a good chance to win. And I know like people like Alex Van Pelt have said Drake May is going to play. He's dealing with like a wrist injury, I think. Yeah. Or maybe it's an ankle. I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, like a hand injury. But like, they're going to try to win this game. And same thing with the Titans. The Titans, they're playing a Texans team that can't move out of the 4 spot. They're locked into the 4 seed. And so same sort of thing applies. It sounds like D'Amico Ryans is taking more of a like, we want to get our guys some momentum going to the playoffs approach, but that doesn't mean those guys are playing the entire game. So I don't know. And the Titans already beat the Texans this year. They beat them earlier this season when they were actually trying to win and they weren't resting people. So I'm just saying, maybe it doesn't happen and the Browns end up as the three pick. But if you think tomorrow's like, oh, well, Browns season's done, I can just kick up my feet or like get some stuff done, you might want to pay attention to these games at 1 o'clock because those two games are severely going to impact where the Browns end up.
And even if one of them gets a job done, you move up to 2, that is certainly like crazy leverage you got, like, because there's going to be teams, and I don't know if we're one of them, but there's 2 quarterbacks that I think that are top 10 worthy or first round worthy, and it's Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Obviously, we'll dive into these guys later in the offseason, but like if you get to 2, that's certainly different than being at 3, and you can leverage that position if you want to trade out, if you want to use the pick, whatever you want to do. But getting to 2 would certainly be great, and getting to 1 obviously would. I hate saying this, man. I'd much rather. I got my playoffs. I got my 2020 playoff shirt on as we're talking number 1 draft pick. How far we have fallen for sure. But getting the 1 pick obviously gets you where you want to be, I guess. I'd rather win football games for sure, but if we can get the 1 pick, great, and then we figure it out from there.
Yeah, but I mean, in a season like this was the best outcome was to finish this way for the fans because now they know they have they're going to be in a good spot for the draft, and that is something as frustrating as it is that it has been a big deal in Cleveland. I mean, this is more so conversation that Browns fans I think are used to this time of year because they only recently started having success that resulted in playoff runs, which is unfortunate. But yeah, like you said, you get a lot of leverage if you end up as one of the top 2 picks in this draft because there might only be 2 quarterbacks that anybody considers are going to be worth a damn. And if that's the case, like chance to maybe trade out if somebody else wants to trade up for that, maybe get more picks. And as you try to build this thing on the fly and get young on the fly and add some talent through the draft, and that's always how teams have to build their rosters. It might behoove you to have an opportunity to get one of these players like obviously, that are multiple players in the first round that can do something for you. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You hit it right on the head, man. It'll be interesting to see how it goes tomorrow. And that's certainly it's not 2 teams that can't win tomorrow. So watching at that 1 o'clock hour is going to be good.
Definitely keep an eye on that. Also keep an eye on all the latest Browns news over at the Cleveland Browns on SI or SI.com/NFL/Browns. Some stories that went up. I didn't even mention Mike Hall Jr. had a knee injury in this game. He was carted off the field. So we'll find out more about the severity of that injury tomorrow. They didn't really have an update after the game other than that he has a knee injury. So there's that. But yeah, we'll have a lot more for you guys as well on the website, like on a written side of things, but also at the Cleveland Browns and SI YouTube channel because tomorrow is locker room cleanout. So a lot of reaction to the season. Last year you got Kareem Hunt kind of talking about how he didn't think he was going to be back next year and then walking out of the locker room with his helmet in his hand and taking it home with him. So yeah, there's a lot there'll be a lot to unpack tomorrow. It's kind of this post-mortem conversation from the players and we'll have a bunch more video up there for you. So be sure again to check all that out as well as more content like this, including post-game press conferences from Kevin Stefanski, Bailey Zappi, I think a little bit of Myles Garrett and guys in the locker room like Rodney McLeod, Jerry Jeudy, and Joe Bitonio. As always, I want to thank you for being part of the conversation with us, not only tonight, but really all season long, because it's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of ups and downs, as you guys are aware. And, we try to have some good, positive conversations with you and hopefully be some therapy for you at times as well. And we'll certainly try to do that throughout the offseason. Just because the season done doesn't mean we're going away. We're trying to maybe do Senior Bowl. I know we're going to be at the Combine again this year. And obviously this year with the draft being what it is and the picks being what they are for the Browns, there's an opportunity to really talk about some good stuff and we'll have some great content for you. So do not unsubscribe. Make sure you do subscribe, like, review any of our stuff over there, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Browns with the Cleveland Browns on SI. Anthony Moeglin, I'm Spencer German, signing off from M&T Bank Stadium. We're on to the offseason, or as Bill Belichick would say, or I guess that's how Bill Belichick would say it. We're on to the offseason. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you again soon.